Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner podcast. And on the podcast today, I have Erick Lemus. Erick, where are you at and what you up to?
Hey, thanks for having me. So I'm actually the assistant coach here at the University of Illinois Springfield. We're a Division II program located in Springfield, Illinois. It's actually my first year here. I just moved out here last summer. After that, I was back at Marymount, California, which is an NAIA school, about 20 minutes south of downtown LA. And then prior to that, I was at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, which is where I also finished my playing days and started coaching there as well.
So, you're in the Midwest now. You were in
Correct.
the West Coast and then all the way in Hawaii. So let's go all the way back to Hawaii. How did you end up in Hawaii?
So I actually also transferred to Hawaii. Like when my freshman year of college, I was in New Hampshire at a Division II school out there. And then I ended up transferring out there after a year. A head coach that I was also kind of talking to when I was in high school ended up taking the job there. And when I wanted to transfer out, I saw that he was there and I figured, Hawaii wouldn't be a terrible place to live. And then, I've always been one of those that for school, I kind of wanted to get away from home. But then being in Hawaii, I was far enough to where we were also playing games in California consistently enough to where my folks could come out and watch me at the games and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what guided my decision out that way. And to this day, I still think it's probably one of the best decisions I made because I'm also in the thought process that if I didn't go there, I don't think I would be coaching because that same head coach is the one that kind of took me under and to become an assistant with him.
So as you played there at the Hawaii, is it Hilo? Is that what you said?
Hilo. Yeah.
Hilo. You must have really connected well with the style of coaching and what have you when you were there. Is that kind of what drew you to continue staying with him?
Like a little bit, yeah. And also, so the assistant coach there was also the DOC for the local club, which is a Hawaii Rush branch. So I started with them. I just started as their goalkeeper coach. I was, the usual, just make some extra money while I'm in school and so on. And then they asked me if I could coach a team, and I was like, sure, why not? Like, could see how this goes. I wasn't really, coaching hadn't really crossed my mind. And then, funny enough, my head coach, his son ended up being on my team, like while I was playing for him. So it kind of just created this dynamic where, like, he saw me coaching, he saw me as I started, growing into it and enjoying it, and then I started doing my licenses and so on. And then the conversations would always come up, and it was actually on a plane ride back from one of our away trips in California where I, was like, I sat next to him for the flight, and the conversation started going back and forth of like, would you ever consider college coaching and so on and so forth. And then I actually started early because I didn't play in my entire 4 years. There was only 2 years, and then my shoulders being a goalkeeper, didn't really help me. And so after the 2 years, he was like, do you want to become a student assistant coach? Because we didn't really have a goalkeeper coach in Hilo, and that's kind of where my role started, and it kind of just grew from there.
What was the dynamic of having his son on your team and seeing him like across on the sidelines watching?
It was a little nervous at first, to be honest with you, because I'm like, being a young 19-year-old kid coaching my coach's son, I was like feeling like, is he judging everything that I'm doing? Like if I take this kid out, because this kid is actually one of our better players. I was like, if I take this kid out because I see that he's tired, like, but then we end up getting scored on, like, am I going to hear the end of this, like, when I come back to practice the next day? But, it was actually not bad. Like, he actually was good at, being a dad compared to just being a coach. Like, he would show up to the field, like, be supportive, and, it wouldn't really come up outside of the club scene. Like, if I went up and asked him, like, hey, what did you think of this? Like, he would answer, but it's not like he would, like, initiate any of that conversation. He actually was very good at, like, keeping the boundary per se of just being a dad and being there supporting his kid compared to anything else.
That's really, really cool. Because some people, as you know from your experience, cannot separate the two, and it's tough. But the other thing is, so Hawaii, what's the you've seen soccer, it sounds like, from all over the U.S. At different levels. What's the soccer like in Hawaii?
It's challenging, but there's definitely talent there, in my opinion. We've seen in the past couple of years talent come out from Hawaii and go to Division I schools. Some of them, going in the pros in the NWSL. A couple guys in USL as well. So I think the talent is definitely there. Obviously, the challenge is just the travel. You can only play the same people so many times before it just gets repetitive and you don't really get challenged by it. And then, you can only go to California so many times a year to play tournaments and such because of kids missing school and just the cost of it and so on. So I do believe that there's definitely challenges there. They're definitely, you know, it's not just like they're hardworking, hard-nosed kids. Like there's definitely like technical players there who can make a difference, in a game from what I've seen and so on. So I think, obviously, can't tell you the solution off the top of my head, but I do believe that there's enough talent there that if there's a way that they can, I don't know, create that pipeline or just get exposed a bit more, that you could hear more of the players from Hawaii more in the future.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I don't think people think about is that access to other like competitive opportunities, and being on an island does kind of, that's a huge obstacle. And like you said, getting the funds to come to the U.S. and California or any of these other places, it's already expensive for most people just to even play club at all.
Yeah,
So
and I don't think some people realize like how far it actually is. Like I tell people, they're like, "How long was the flight?" I was like, "It's about a 5.5 hour flight from LA to Hawaii." And people are like, "Oh wow, I didn't realize it was that far." It's like, yeah, it's basically the same as flying from LA to New York. Like it's a pretty decent flight. So it's not like you can just say like I'm gonna fly there on Friday and come back Sunday and like feel fine. Like for our college games, we would be gone 10 to 12 days at a time because we would fly to California, that 6 hour flight, play 4 California schools in like a 10-day span, and then have to fly back.
yeah, I was gonna say you'd almost have to plan it to get most bang for your buck. So like you said, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be flying just for one game, just to go,
Yeah.
just to fly
So
back.
like when I was there, like I know our club teams, they would fly to like California and they would try and get 2 to 3 tournaments in like a 2 to 3 week span and like stay with family as much as they can or so on to try and get the most out of their trip.
So from what figuring out is your family is from California.
Correct. I'm originally from LA, born and raised, and then I didn't move out of LA until I went to college.
And so I know that California and LA and stuff is kind of a hotbed of soccer. What's the, from where you bounced around, what's LA's kind of style of play, and the, is it kind of a religion, or what kind of
It,
I hear all the time that that's where it's like all the spicy players and saucy and all kinds of just all kinds of cool skill moves and what have you.
it's a good mix. I would say kind of would also depend on like as any team on your coach. Like I had a coach who, we had good technical players who were able to get us on the ball, but he also wanted some of those players who just created something out of nothing and were just special players. But like obviously being gone the past couple of years, I've seen glimpses of it. Like when I'm recruiting, or like last year, when I went home for a year to LA and I worked at the NAIA school, I was able to be involved for a bit, and um, it's definitely competitive. I think most games out there, once you get to like the higher levels, you get a competitive game no matter who you're playing, which is great, which creates good competitors who like want to win no matter what. Um, and like I said, it's just mostly you definitely get those not fancy, but like the flashy players and all that. But you get a lot of good technical players as well, and it's a good mix overall from LA or even like the valley above LA down to San Diego. And then you got a lot of those big clubs who have their style of play already ingrained in them, that's what they get taught. And it's just about, the individual coaches, allowing the players to be individualistic and not just so much hidden in their identity per se.
Has your experience being in California and like Hawaii helped in terms of recruiting to University of Illinois Springfield?
So it has a bit. We actually have one kid coming from San Diego that committed recently who, through a friend that I had back in California, a goalkeeper. When I told him I was coming out here, I was like, hey, give me a couple of weeks and I'll be in touch. And things were able to work out as well. There's another couple for next year that, conversations have been slowly but surely. But like even when I was in Hilo and beforehand, like I try to do well at keeping in touch with the people I've worked with, people that I've grown up with and are now coaching as well, and just keeping that communication. And anytime they know of someone who might be interested or they could see fitting in where I'm at, like we'll be in touch and the conversations start there. Being only here a year, haven't really started the pipeline yet, but we were talking to like 2 or 3 of them, and then we were able to get one of them to say yes. One of them told us that he wants to go somewhere else, and then the other one we're kind of still seeing where things are going out. But I try to at least, bring in. And the good thing is here at UIS, we have a good mix of guys from Chicago area, Arizona, New Mexico, a handful of internationals as well. So like the good thing is I feel like when kids see that there's a mix of everywhere, they feel more comfortable being like, oh, there's a lot of guys there who have been through what I'm going to go through of being new to Springfield and so on.
That is a cool little thing to know that there's people that are you're not the only one going through that experience. What drew you
Right.
to UIS and brought you from Hilo?
So I came here from Marymount when I was at last year, the NAIA school, and I was only there for a year. And really, what attracted me here was just an exciting opportunity to just, take a small step up. Like I was still an assistant coach last year, but being here, like I'm the only like assistant on staff. Like we have two other guys that volunteer as well who were players on the team last year. But like when it comes to being in the office, it's me and my head coach. And my goal in the long run is to hopefully be a head coach eventually of a collegiate program. And it was through a mutual friend that I got in touch with him and heard good things about him and the program. Did my research and saw that the team had been progressing year to year. So it looked like an exciting opportunity for me to come in, get some good experience being the assistant, working under a good head coach. In a very competitive conference where we have like I think four nationally ranked teams in our conference. One of them was in the Final Four last year, so I felt like this was a good opportunity for me to also like spread my wings and see what I can do with a little more responsibility on my shoulders as well.
What what other things kind of brought you? So it sounds like for me that the networking has been huge for you in terms of just
Mhm.
connecting with people. Do you continue to reach back and touch base with the coach from Hilo and the coach from Marymount?
I do actually. So the good thing is like so the head coach who originally hired me in Hilo, he left after like a year or two, and the guy who was the assistant, like while I played, and then the like first assistant when I started, took over the job, and I worked under him for the last 3 years. And he's a really good friend of mine who will text or have a phone call like occasionally and all that. So we keep in touch very well. From Marymount, I still text with the other guys who were the assistants and the head coach as well. So like obviously with everything going on, we like to keep in touch and see how things are going with the athletic department and the program and such. And even like with my coaches from growing up, like my old club coach is also the assistant at Cal State LA. So I keep in good contact with him. I'll try to get in touch with him if I ever like have a question or advice about such. And then the guy who was my goalkeeper coach growing up, I've been able to work with him and his academy whenever I'm back in LA. And if I ever have a question about goalkeeping or goalkeeper stuff, because I also do the goalkeeper training for us here, I'll reach out to him and I know I can call him or text him and we'll be in touch there as well.
So the goalkeeping aspect, how did you end up becoming a goalkeeper? Because that's a unique brand of player that has to kind of fit that role. Were you always a goalkeeper, or was that just something that just came
I
about?
I used I started at about 10 years old and I would split time on the field and in goal. And then my dad was actually the coach of my team. It was like a Sunday league park league team. And my dad tells me that I became a goalie because I told him I didn't want to do the running at practice, which I which to this day I believe because I just hate running no matter like even when I go to the gym I'm like damn I gotta run today but I'll do it. And then I don't know, I think I've it's funny because like I tell people like I hate being the center of attention and all that sort of stuff, but when I'm in goal, like I think I thrived off the pressure. Because like when my teams would go to PKs, like I was excited. I wanted to be in the PKs. I wanted to make that save to win the game. And then I don't know really what attracted me to it after that. I think I kind of just stuck to it, and then because I felt so comfortable in it, and like I think I had a good confidence of people telling me like you're good at this, you can do this and do that. And I'm like anybody and any kid, like I had ups and downs and moments where I doubted like if was what I wanted to do, but as I kept going through it, it was a good experience for me. I think because I played goalkeeper, it kind of helps me with the coaching stuff because obviously we're always told to communicate, see the game, read the game, and so on. But I'm definitely one of those that say like you got to be a different breed to be a goalkeeper. We're definitely wired a bit differently, and like I see it in myself, I see it in the kids that I've coached and so on. But yeah, I split the field up until I think it was like my freshman year of high school, and then that's when I kind of said like I'm sticking to the goalkeeping spot, and then that's kind of what I wrote rode to college and so on. And then the goalkeeping coach part was what got me into the collegiate coaching stuff at first. So
What was the transition like going from being a player who like just fed off of all of the intensity and the big moments to now I have to be a coach of a kid in that spot?
it was interesting, especially from the college side. It was definitely a little harder because I went from being teammates with the three coaches or the three goalkeepers that I coached to being their coach like within the 3 month span. Like in the May of that spring semester, I was still training with them, hanging out like we're all buddies. And then when they came back for preseason in August, I was their coach. So it definitely took um, some mental fortitude and some, trying to not set boundaries, but try and set the thing of like, hey, we can still be friends to a point, but I also like need you guys to, help me make this a little bit easier on myself and such. Was hard during games at first because I was one of those that like, a young coach is like I couldn't sit down during a game because I just wanted to be in the game that bad, and I kind of had to slowly but surely like settle myself down and say like, hey, you wanted the pressure on the field, but it's a different type of pressure now being on the bench. And obviously as an assistant coach, it was different. And as I got more involved in being a head coach, and then I also started being a head coach for high school out in Hawaii and feeling like that pressure of like the big games during the playoff game and stuff, I was like, okay, this is the pressure I kind of miss being on the field, just in a different way. So I think once I realized that and, started feeling that, it kind of helped me trigger that competitive drive again of being like, this is the pressure I want. Now I need to perform under the pressure.
I completely get the whole transitional being a teammate to now all of a sudden I'm above you a little bit
Yeah.
in that thing. Did it take a while to get kind of work through some of that, or did you find that the guys were like, okay, we get it and we rock and roll?
I think it did take a couple months at least. And thinking back at it, I also probably could have made it a bit better myself, because I think I was also in that mindset of like, I don't want you guys to hate me. So I was trying to, sometimes I would go from being too strict to maybe being too friendly. So I was also challenged by trying to find the balance, which obviously, they say hindsight 2020, looking back, I'm like, I should have done this, I should have done that. But at the same time, it's like, things worked out. I'm here now. Like I still have keep in touch with a couple of guys and so on. So, it worked out in the long run, but it definitely took a bit longer than maybe I would have liked. But at the end of the day, it worked out well enough, and it was also difficult to the point because in Hilo at the time, it was the same coaching staff for both programs. So I had the men's team who, same thing, I was friends with, teammates with them, and the women's teams who, we would all hang out and still together and stuff. So I had to basically do that with 6 goalkeepers who were like my friends and teammates a couple months ago to now I'm coaching them and working with them and such.
Interesting dynamic for sure. And then I'm assuming that experience, though, as maybe it didn't work out as quickly or smoothly as maybe you had hoped, looking back, has now propelled you on. Do you feel like that's made you a better coach now when you moved on to Marymount and now to UIS?
I think so, because I think I mean, obviously, other people can say differently or can tell me from the outside, but I feel like I do a decent enough job of, having a good relationship with guys and the players of, I can get along with them, joke around with them, ask them, how's the so-and-so going? But when it gets time to work and train and, in the game, it's still enough to where like, if I tell them something, they're listening and they understand where it's coming from. And then again, when the game's over, like yesterday after the game where we won the game in overtime and, everyone gets all celebratory and they're having their music in the locker room and I can jump in and be an idiot with them for 5 minutes. And then when I got to tell them, hey, let's clean up, we got to go, like they're grabbing their stuff and we're heading out. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. The other thing, so you're born and raised in California.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but it sounds like everywhere that you've gone has been multiple hours away from California. Like you talked about, New Hampshire was kind of where your first destination, then to Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
and Marymount brought you back to California, and then you're here. What have you always been kind of like, hey, I want to get away from California, or was it just something that just happened?
I think it's just something that happened. Because obviously, being from a Hispanic family, Hispanic background, my entire family is in California. My grandma, my cousins, everyone's there. And as I tell my mom the same, I'm like, as much as I'd love to be in LA, I'm one of those guys that I kind of just made the mindset of I'm gonna go wherever there's an opportunity. And as much as I love LA and Southern California, when it comes to the collegiate coaching world, I think we both know it's so difficult to get in there because it's Southern California. So I think I kind of just went through the mindset of I'm going to go where I have to in order to get in the collegiate world. And the goal is to hopefully one day move back there and get there. But if I don't, I'm just like I said, it's a competitive driver. I'm just going to go where the best opportunity lies for me. And if that's in California, great. And if it's not, then I roll with the punches. You know, I've never been one that says like I want to live here. I have to live in here. Like it just I go where the opportunity lies. That's why like I get the question all the time like, dude, how do you go from living in Hawaii to coming to Illinois where we had a polar vortex a month ago and it's 0 degrees outside? I'm just like I don't really care about the weather as much as like I'm gonna go where I feel is the best opportunity for me. And I I love Springfield anyway. As like everyone here is awesome. The people that work around me in the athletic department are awesome. So I don't really have any complaints and such. So
What was your family's take on that? If so much of your family is there in California, were they like supportive or like how did that dynamic work out?
I'm blessed that my entire family, from my parents to my sisters to my grandma, they're supportive 100%. Like obviously everyone misses me, I miss them, and I've missed out on some big family stuff like a couple weddings, a couple quinceañeras growing up from my cousins and such. But everyone's 100% supportive. I think a little bit might have to be just I'm one of the older cousins, so I'm kind of like the first that graduated and stuff, first that did so on and so forth. So there's that little bit of dynamic of like, let's let him do his thing. So, I always get the thing like, oh, your little cousins are looking up to you, and I'm just like, thanks. Okay, a little more pressure to perform, but it's a good one. And so I think both sides of the coin. Like everyone's 100% supportive. Like no one ever is upset per se that I'm leaving. But at the same time, I'll get like those calls from my grandma or my aunt, my cousins. They're like, dude, we miss you. Like when are you coming home? And I'm just like, whenever I get some free time, because coaching two club teams and the college team, like with recruiting and such, I have to like plan my months ahead of time so I can get some free time.
I think it's cool that you're kind of the trailblazer for the family to look up to, even if there is a little bit of pressure. But it's cool for the younger family members to see you kind of like, and like you've talked about, I'm just going to kind of go roll with the punches. So if there's an opportunity and it's something that I want to go after, like you said, the stop here at UIS or the ability to be here is your next step along where you hopefully will end up being a head coach at a college at some point. And I think it's so cool that you even said, like, I'm not really worried about where I'm at. Like, I'm not here because if I wanted perfect weather, I would have stayed in California where it's, sunny and warm all the time. And I love that. So did you arrive in Springfield last summer?
Yeah, I arrived in mid-July.
So what was the transition of you show up and at that point you're probably like, dude, let's rock and roll, let's do this, and then boom, COVID hits, and it's shutting things down. What was your semester like last semester?
Yeah, so it wasn't that bad actually. So when I was in California, obviously California is a bit more closed down. Like we had just started club practices when I first heard about this job, but we were doing the whole non-contact, like everyone has to do basically the individual skill work. And then when I got out to here in mid-July, like it was a bit more open. So we were actually allowed to train with contact. We were just starting allowed to have scrimmages and stuff for club. So I was able to get back to that somewhat normal feeling of running a session, coaching in a game again. And then when it comes to the college side, we were actually a bit lucky here that being through the University of Illinois system, like we were getting tested once or twice a week through a quick like saliva 24-hour result test. So we were actually able to train normally with contact as well, like with the entire team. So it did feel a bit more normal, even though we didn't have the games. And then we just kind of created our own like Friday night lights, inter squad scrimmage stuff to make it seem a little more normal. But we were a bit lucky here where we didn't have to go through any of the pod training or the individual training. We were able to get in, get tested, and then right away jump into training like with the full team.
So did you guys do that throughout the entire fall?
Yeah. So we basically like the usual spring 45-day window that would happen in a regular school year. We had that in the fall. And then we did have to have a 2-week pause just because campus in general. And then they allowed us to extend that 2 weeks. So it basically almost extended the entire fall semester of training wise. And then we're going through the same process now in the spring during our season with, getting tested and, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's awesome in a way because now the guys are used to getting tested. They kind of know the routine. So this it's been a smooth kind of slide into the spring, I would think now. What does the spring season look like? Are you guys playing like league teams only, or do you have like a full schedule?
So we were a bit lucky. So our regular season we're playing a conference only schedule, which is still we're in a 15-team conference, so it's a pretty decent amount of games. And then our school actually allowed us to still have two scrimmages before we got into that. So we were basically able to have 16 games total. We're 6 games into our season right now. So we were 3 weeks in. We played 2 games per weekend, and then our conference is also planning on having a conference tournament at the end of all that. So we could have up to 17 games, if we're hopefully make it to the final and such.
Wow, it's awesome to hear. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
almost normal, uh,
Yeah,
in a way. What's the dynamic of playing so 2 games in a weekend? So that's like a Friday Sunday type setup.
correct.
So what's that like in terms of preparing goalkeepers and such for 2 games like in such a short period of time?
Yeah, so it has its challenges. Like it's a bit easier like during the regular week per se because we have today Mondays are usually our off days because we play Friday Sunday, and we get into training Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday, Wednesday being our heavier days. When me being the assistant coach, we do goalkeeper training only once a week on the Thursdays, and then it's more of at this point it's more of just keeping the guys sharp. Keeping our starter feeling ready to go like for the games and such. Um, and then on that Saturday, it's a lot more of a recovery day, a lot lighter. Like we might do just some simple technical, just catching, simple diving stuff. And our guys have loved going into overtime this year, so we've had 4 overtime games and 6 games. So the guys are a bit sore. So on the Saturday, it's definitely a lighter energy. Just like a jog and a stretch, maybe some shooting, some soccer, tennis, or something fun like that. But it's definitely the Thursday we have a full keeper specific session that goes like hour 15 where it's just me and the goalkeepers going through our stuff.
So when people hear that someone's an assistant coach at a college, what are some of the roles and responsibilities that kind of fall within into your lap?
So you get the usual, obviously, right? Helping with training sessions, helping with recruiting and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of the roles that even I didn't realize when I was playing is you gotta make sure for the food for the away trips, booking hotels, submitting the care log compliance stuff for NCAA to our compliance officer, and the little tasks like that. That even when I was playing, I didn't realize had to get done because then you just you finish playing and like, oh, here's the food, let me eat it. But it's just like like even yesterday we're in overtime and I got the food delivery guy calling me with 5 minutes left in overtime, and I'm just like, this is the worst time for this call, but I have to take it or the food's not going to get delivered, and so on. But it's like that. It was like a joke I saw on Twitter. Like I guess like one of the big division, I think it was Michigan. Their basketball assistant coach was like on the phone in the middle of the game, and someone just retweeted saying like every small school assistant coach knows this feeling where you have to take the food phone call in like the dying minutes of the game. But those are definitely the tasks that like now I just take it and I roll with it, and like it's enjoyable because when the guys get fed, they're like, oh, thanks for the food, and I'm just like, yeah, like for sure. And like I didn't realize it back when I was playing, like someone has to order the food, and it's usually not going to be the head coach doing that.
That's awesome because I've heard similar stories from some other guys that I've spoken with about the amount of things that go on and what have you. What's been your experience when it comes to the recruiting side? What's that like as a coach at the college level?
I personally I enjoy it. I love going to like the tournaments and the showcases and being able to go and watching games in person. Obviously those are good opportunities to be able to network and meet new coaches and so on. This year's obviously been a bit different just with everything with the pandemic and just being some tournaments get canceled, some don't. Some of them are going with the virtual recruiting route. We were still able to go to a couple showcases in the fall, because I also coach an under-17 boys team, so I'd take them to basically the same tournaments I'd be going to anyway. Like here at UIS, we have I think maybe half our team's international guys, so we also deal with a lot of the international recruiting services and international guys getting in touch with us. But our head coach, him being international as well, kind of takes more of those reins while I kind of help out with more like the local guys, like the Chicago area guys, like I said, a couple of the California guys and so on. But it's also a good dynamic where like if I get a guy that I think would be good, I send it to him so he can watch it and vice versa. So it's a good relationship, and it's kind of been the same way at every school that I've been at. Like everyone kind of has their role of like, you're looking for this, you're looking for that. I usually, of course, I always get the goalkeeper side of it, and it's just of like, if it's a guy that's worth maybe pursuing, um, letting the whole staff watch it so that we can all be included in knowing what's going on.
It sounds like you and the head coach there have a good kind of give and take on certain things. Has it been a really good kind of, like you spoke earlier about really positive things about the staff for the athletic department there at UIS? Have you enjoyed the move there and the head coach and the whole kind of the program experience so far?
Yeah, I would say so. It's been a good dynamic for sure. Work wise, and then also like whenever, not when things are slow, quote unquote, or like when it's right after a big game, like when we're on the bus, we can talk and joke around stuff that just isn't about our team. Like everyone here, we follow professional soccer. Like everyone here has a Premier League team. Like I'm a Man U fan, he's a Tottenham fan. One of our other guys is a Wolves fan. Like we have guys on the team that are Arsenal fans. So like that's always a good fun banter that comes up. Like yesterday with the Spurs Arsenal game, like we had it on the iPad at the front of the bus, and all the staff's watching it. We got three guys like behind us trying to like look over our shoulders and watch it. And so it's just one of those where like when comes to work stuff, like everyone bounces their ideas off, and then when it comes to we just want to unwind and have fun and joke around stuff, we can as well. And like I said, the entire athletic department's the same way. Like the women's coaching staff is awesome. Like we'll hang out and like pop over to their offices when we have some time to kill, and vice versa. So it's been a good dynamic. I mean, obviously every school and place that you're at has its challenges that you just got to roll with, but I can't say I'm unhappy or any of that sort.
That's awesome. It's always good to be. It sounds like each place that you've ended up, whether it was Hilo or Marymount or where you're at now, that uh, you've always had like a good network, and it sounds like you've connected along the way. So everything you've kind of shared so far about like talking with a buddy and got like a possible recruit to come to UIS, and even to where you're at now, where you just talked to a buddy who told you kind of about this opportunity. So you spoke earlier about wanting to be a college coach. Is there a timeline on that type of thing, or is this still kind of Erick's like, if the opportunity comes, I might look at it, but for right now, I'm focused on UIS?
It's more on that side, I would say. Obviously, everyone wants to say the sooner the better, and then you hear of guys that are like around my age or like a year or two older already getting head coaching opportunities. But then I also go along the lines of, is it the right opportunity for me? Is it a place where I'm going to go and be happy? Is it a place where you're going to go and maybe it's one of those places where they don't get as much support from the school, so that's why they're just making those hires or so on? Or is it a place where I can actually see myself having a future, being successful and stuff? But honestly, like in this past year, it's been like more in the back burner of the mind. Like I've been focused on getting things done here. Like I said, we have in my opinion, a competitive team with a good dynamic where the guys are great, staff has been great. So I don't have a set timeline where I'm like by 30 I want to be a head coach. It's just like when the right opportunity arises, it'll make itself known to me.
I love that kind of outlook of I'm just going to keep plugging away. The other thing I think is really cool is you're kind of like self-awareness of if it's not the right fit, and not just the soccer, but the entire department of the athletics. What are their other programs like? How are they supported? Like you said, like I don't want to go in and have to be battling the whole time with off-field things on top of the on-field type of thing. What has doing club and college at the same time? How has that dynamic worked out for you?
It's a bit interesting. So especially with my under 17 boys team here, like they're a competitive team. They're one of those that like they're looking to get recruited and such. So one of the first things I usually do when I took over this team, I brought them in. I'm like, so you guys know I'm a college coach. Now my question to you guys is, do you want me to lead you and treat you and train you like if it's a collegiate team? So, keeping those standards and so on and so forth, or do we want a bit looser reins and so on? And I let them make the decision for themselves. They came back saying like, hey, we want you to push us because we want to end up in college and so on and so forth. So I'm able to, have a little bit more of intense training sessions, have some good standards with them and so on. And, even with them, like we're lucky that our club uses the trace camera system. So we have our games recorded. So we'll have Zoom calls and go over our games and so on and do stuff like that. which obviously probably as much as I do that there's other teams where the kids maybe aren't as invested, so you can have those Zoom sessions, but they might not be as involved in them. Well, as I'm getting questions from my guys going and so on and so forth, which makes it easier for me to plan those because I know they want to do it. And then it's also good for me, I think, as a coach, because I joke around with my head coach. It's like sometimes when I have an idea for training, I'll run it with them, and if it works, I'll bring it to the college guys. And then if it doesn't, then I might tweak it a little bit, bring it back there, and then if it works, bring it to the college guys and use it here. So it's a bit of a give and take, and then it's good as well because like my club kids are supportive of the program. Like some of them want to come out and watch the games. When we have ID camps, they want to come and check it out, see how we're like here, and so on and so forth. And it helps that those comps where we train at is like walking distance away from our stadium field and so on, so they're pretty close by.
I love the fact that you kind of came in with kind of like, look, I am a college coach, and I love the fact that you communicate with them. Like, what level do you want to be pushed? Like, we can kind of, like you said, we can do it as a, I don't know, quote unquote regular level type selecting. Like, we'll do a lot of good stuff and do club type things, and we'll put you in good environments. Or I can raise the level a little bit and push you. And I love the fact that the boys are like, let's do this. And like you said, even with the Zoom calls, and I know just sometimes you feel like, am I the only one talking in this session?
Yeah.
But I love the fact that they continually are kind of like throwing out stuff and getting input on that. And the idea of having them as quote unquote guinea pigs is kind of a cool idea of like, hey, I've got this great idea. Let's just work it with them. And you're probably getting feedback from them as well as you're watching it. Like, what worked here, what didn't? Did you guys like the size? Like maybe the grid should have been bigger. Or should I have had, whatever. I think that's cool that you're able to kind of have that to try, because instead of just having everything in one bowl, you've got the club and the college type thing. And I think it's cool that you're able to share that with the coach, which goes back to like what I was talking about earlier, that good kind of give and take between the two of you.
And it helps that he also coaches at the same club that I do. I have the 17s, like the 04s, he has the 02s, so we're usually side by side with each other as well. And like, because the club we work for is Central Illinois, so we'll train like in Springfield once a week, and then we drive an hour north to Peoria to train the other time a week, because we have kids from both sides of it, so to kind of keep it split. And then me and him will carpool and drive together, so we also have like those car rides where same thing, we'll talk soccer, or we'll just be jamming out to music or just doing something to kill the time while we get there. And then going back to the communication and me bringing it to the guys as well, I did that and asking them that because I also, being the young coach, made the mistake of, with a previous club team, not here, but I think it was when I was still back in Hilo. I came in saying I'm a club coach, so I'm a college coach, so I'm gonna run you guys like a college team, and those kids didn't want it. So I got a lot of pushback, a lot of like, not animosity, but just like you could tell they weren't really happy to be there because maybe they didn't want to get pushed that hard. Mm-hmm. And it took me a bit of time to realize that and maybe pull the reins back. So when I was here and I'm like, I'm getting a fresh start, like let me see what they want out of their experience so I can also provide that, because at the end of the day, you don't want to push kids away from the game. You want them to enjoy it, and you want them to get what they want out of it as well. And thankfully I have a good group of kids there who, like I said, want to get pushed. They all want to have the goal of playing collegiately. So when I brought them that, they all unanimously basically were like, hey, like, let's do it. And I tell them, like, if you guys have any questions or comments individually, like, you're more than welcome to come and ask me. I say the same thing to their parents, and I'll have parents call me and say like, hey, I just wondering, like, why'd you do this at training? And we'll have a good conversation and go from there. Like, I haven't really had an issue with anybody so far.
The one thing that I've heard kind of consistently through this conversation is your ability to look back on your previous experiences and pull from those. So that experience at Hilo, where you may have over pushed the guys a little bit, to back when you were trying to coach guys, or well, I guess girls and guys, keepers who you were buddies with, 4 months before, and now you learn from that. I think it's really cool that you're able to kind of self-evaluate and say what worked and what didn't work, even within the training session, of like what worked here that I could take beyond that. The other thing that I think's been cool is you talked about the plane ride, where it kind of got you into coaching, where you were just conversating about it with the coach, and he was like, hey, would you think about doing this? And then the car rides and stuff. How beneficial are those kind of non-formal learning opportunities been for you?
I think they're very good. And I honestly think sometimes I learn more from the informal conversations than I will from the formal ones. Because when you go into like a formal meeting or like review or at the end of the year and stuff, you're a bit nervous, or you kind of don't know what to ask or what feedback to ask for, because you don't know if you're overstepping or if they already have their mindset. While the more informal stuff, it kind of like this. It's just a conversation where things flow, and then eventually you might learn something, or you might take something that you weren't expecting, and so on. Because like even like I said with my old goalkeeper coach, who I still keep in touch with greatly and all that. Like when I was back in LA, like we'd go have a beer, and it would start off as just regular random conversation, and it would turn into something about like training. I was like this, or I was like, hey, I had this idea, and we would go back and forth and so on. And like even like same thing when we go recruiting, or like last year in LA in this 2019, they had like a goalkeeping coaches conference, like a smaller one compared to the Florida one, and we had the formal conference during the day, and at night a handful of us are same thing, having a couple beers, and then we all start bouncing ideas off of each other, and it's just like, oh, I never would have thought of that. What do you think of this? And then that's kind of how we just bounce ideas back and forth.
Yeah, I've heard similar things about when people go to like conventions and stuff, that it's
Mm-hmm.
awesome with the presenters, but it's that time afterward where you go and grab a bite to eat or a drink, where the real kind of get to know guys a little bit better as coaches, and then the conversations become a little bit more uh, kind of, you can get it more individualized to what your setting is and all that type of stuff. Uh, Eric, this conversation has been sweet. Um, if people want to connect with you or follow up and check out more about the University of Illinois Springfield, what are some of the ways that they can connect with you?
I'm on, the Instagram and Twitter, and Twitter is probably the best one to get a hold of me. It's just at Coach Lemus _. Obviously, you can find my email and information on our UIS website, uisprostars.com. So if people want to get a hold of me, you can just shoot me an email or through there, or give me a call on my cell. I'm usually pretty open to responding and getting in touch with people who have questions. So Twitter would be best for the easy social media route. And if they want to go through the more formal stuff through there, you can just shoot me an email and so on.
The one thing I will say was really cool, because Eric and I just connected just recently, like in the past week or so. And he was like, boom, I want to get on, let's chat. And he's been awesome at getting back and all that type of stuff. So I know if you have questions and you send them his way, he'd be more than happy to connect back with you. The other thing is just listening to his story, the ability to go from like that California experience of growing up and playing to Hawaii to now the Midwest. I think he's got just a huge plethora of kind of experiences. And as you can tell, just from the conversation, great insight onto what has worked and what needs to be, worked on, and what have you. So Eric, I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
And I will shut this thing down. This is Kieran with Coach's Corner Chats with Erick Lemus, and I'm out. Peace.